Hello, my name is Jimmy Nuts, and I am here to tell you about the books I read this month.
Oh, are we singing this episode?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Bobby. Bobby, why don't you give us a little ditty, huh?
Oh, with pleasure. Hello, my name is Bobby B, and I want to show you my enormous pee-pee.
Whoa, 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 whoa. This is a family channel, Bobby. My goodness, you're going to get us demonetized.
Are we really going to pretend like this channel isn't already in the crapper?
You're not wrong. Welcome back to the Fantasy Network, everyone. I'm sorry for the stupid intro, but it is time to put May in a nutshell and talk about everything that I read in the month of May. I'll give you a little sneak peek of what I'm reading in June, but mostly, obviously, these are recaps, wrap-ups, whatever you want to call them here on the YouTube space with books. There are 7 things I want to go over here. About 2 or 3 of them I covered in a reading vlog, but there's some stuff that I have not talked about on camera yet, which is always very exciting, and we will be picking a random book from the Patreon picks. But let's talk about all the books that I did read this month. I finished this book right at the beginning of the month, but I really started it back in April, and that, of course, was Born by Jeff Vandermeer. This is a part of a series, but I really planned on just reading this as a standalone, and I have to say, I really enjoyed this. The only other thing I've read from Jeff Vandermeer is actually Annihilation, but Born intrigued me because, one, I had heard many people say that it was better than Annihilation, but I had also heard that this is post-apocalyptic, and post-apocalyptic is probably my favorite setting in fiction, even though it's definitely been done a lot. This felt completely different than almost anything else that I had read. This world feels like it has had a lot of advancements in technology, but things had broken down. And of course, there's a big evil corporation that is maybe to fault for this. And this town is being patrolled, or I guess you would say managed somewhat, by a bear that can fly, which is bizarre. And that indeed is what I feel like I could describe Born as bizarre. You end up falling around Rachel, who is the main character, and she has a relationship with another person. And a lot of this, I think, is trying to flesh out exactly what love means in this post-apocalyptic world where survival comes first, no matter what. And also, what side will you choose in faction wars? How can you stay independent from yourself? And also, obviously, this corporation has had people doing a lot of things that maybe people aren't so proud of now, or they were cast out, and how do they handle that kind of guilt? Or maybe they don't care about handling the guilt of it, but more so just getting revenge. There's a lot of stuff to go along with this, but Born is an adorable but also weird companion that ends up coming about, and I won't say any much more for spoiler reasons, but I thought that this book was really endearing in some ways, could also be a little bit frightening, and full of imagination with wonderful writing. Jeff Vandermeer's writing is something that I do really enjoy. Listening to him talk about the craft of writing, specifically in sci-fi and fantasy, is one of the things that I'm very interested in. I have his Wonder book that he has compiled, which is full of just different authors from different backgrounds, giving writing advice for the sci-fi and fantasy genre, and it's excellent if you have not seen it. So I've read a bit of that as well. Vandermeer is clearly confident in what he does. He has these crazy ideas and then is able to put them on the page, but not just the ideas, also very good characters and a great plot, at least in my opinion. This was a trippy one. I would say that I would like to reread it, but also read the other things that are in this series. But Born was a great book. I really loved it. Maybe not an all-time favorite, maybe not in the book of the year category, but just a great sci-fi read. And I know many people who this is their favorite sci-fi book. So if you're looking for a different take on post-apocalyptic stuff with some really out there stuff, I mean, I said flying bear, but really, how cool is that? You should give this one a shot. Most of this month has been sci-fi and fantasy, and maybe even just a little bit more sci-fi than fantasy, but a good mix of that. And only one contemporary fiction book that I read was from Kazuo Ishiguro, and I always hope that I say that name right, but this is someone who's won the Nobel Prize in Literature. I've talked about before on the channel because Remains of the Day is one of my favorite books that I've read this year. So instead of going to Never Let Me Go or Claire and the Sun, I decided to go with his debut novel because my friend Mitch read it and really enjoyed it, and that is A Pale View of Hills. This book is his debut. It is not as sharp as Remains of the Day. I think that it just doesn't have that same smoothness, but still extraordinarily readable. Checking in at 183 pages, you could easily read this in a day for how smooth it goes. And ultimately, a little bit light on plot, pretty big on eeriness, and 100% psychological. With an unreliable narrator, you were talking with or following a lady who has lost a daughter to suicide, and her other daughter from a different husband has come to visit her, and then you get flashbacks to back when she was first pregnant. A lot of this has to do with the identity of Japan after World War II, but beyond that, also just what it means to take care of someone else, loving that society, and then being a mother. It's very impactful, and one that when I closed the book, everything about it got better. I would reread this. I would recommend it to anyone who wants a psychological read. Just know that it's not going to knock your socks off with the plot, but this will give you a lot to think about in 183 pages. And this is one of the 2 5-stars that I had this month. So you know it's getting the nut button, and this continues to be an author that cannot stop impressing me. Just 183 pages and gets a whole heck of a lot out of that real estate. I'll tell you what, let's just talk about the other 5-star book for this month, and that was Lord of Emperors by Guy Gavriel Kay, Sarantine Mosaic, Book 2. It's the finisher for the duology, and I can only say that Lord of Emperors does everything that Sailing to Sarantium does, but does it better and bigger and just more spectacle to it, while still remaining grounded in the drama of interpersonal relationships and outcomes and failures and successes. And the chariot race is just amazing in this. Yes, spoiler alert, there's a chariot race in both books, but the one in Lord of Emperors is even better than the first one, which I thought was awesome. This is one that I've been talking about, like, hey, you want to adapt something? Adapt this. Low budget, get amazing actors. You can take a whole lot of the writing right from the book, and it would be an absolute slammer of a television show if done properly. But Sarantine Mosaic is maybe the most impressive plot-wise for me out of all Guy Gavriel Kay's books. I still like Song for Our Bond more. That's my favorite Guy Gavriel Kay book. However, this one is the one that blows my mind because apparently Guy Gavriel Kay does not outline his stories, so he is a discovery writer like many others that I love. But you would never know it because of how satisfying his endings are. And he takes such a long period of Lord of Emperors to examine the falling action of this really crazy climax. Not all the fireworks in the world, but like big implications for the world that you're spending time in. And the falling action just ties everything up so beautifully. Some things don't go perfectly well. Some things are actually a little bit different than you would expect them. And you still feel as if when you close the last page that the characters are going to continue on and live their lives and have to deal with the decisions that they've made. He could easily do like 3 or 4 more books in this series, and I wouldn't be shocked, and I would read them immediately. But he doesn't. He showed you a time and place in this world's history, and he executes it beautifully. And they're really big, impactful events if you can get invested in the world and the story, which I did. Easy nut button for Lord of Emperors, even better than Sailing to Sarantium. And there was a character introduced only in book 2 that is my favorite character, maybe, of the duology, which I find to be impressive. Guy Gavriel Kay, you're incredible, dude. Shaman's Crossing by Robin Hobb was the Patreon pick of the month for May. So shouts out to you, Terrence. And what can I say about Shaman's Crossing? I can just say, hey, it's not Realm of the Elderlings and it's not Fitz. So it's the other Robin Hobb book and series. And that's all I got for you. So moving on. No, I'm just kidding. Shaman's Crossing gets a lot of hate. Way more hate than almost anything else I've ever seen Robin Hobb put out. And a lot of 1 stars. And I think that comes from a place of this is not Fitz, who is the main character for almost all of Realm of the Elderlings and written in a very personable way. You have Navarre, who is not the most inspiring main character. But the surprising thing that I had to take away from Shaman's Crossing and how I feel about it is that I think Shaman's Crossing is better than some of the Realm of the Elderlings books. I did not love all of Realm of the Elderlings. I love the series. Some of those books are some of my favorites of all time, but there were times where my enjoyment dipped a bit. And I think, for me, Shaman's Crossing is somewhere in that middle. It's not a great book. It's not one that I would recommend to a ton of people, but I think it's above average when you look at like the landscape of fantasy and what comes out and what we read and how much of it we just read and forget and throw away, or world building that feels extremely cookie cutter. That's not really what I got from this. It still feels as if it's a slice of life, very similar to Realm of the Elderlings. Navarre's just not as compelling. The world setup, a little bit more compelling, though not completely brand new in any means. I mean, we have a force that is taking over lands. The Plains people are considered to be barbaric. You know, we've seen this time and time again. However, there's a lot more nuance to the situation than it first seems. And as that went on, I realized, oh, there's a lot more going on in this world, which I loved. The Plains people are very interesting. They have different groups. And the way it's set up, I just think that it has set up book 2 and 3 to do a lot, and they do have to deliver. But as a book 1, it does what it's supposed to do. The beginning was, for me, gripping. And then at the end of the book, I was also very interested in what happens in book 2, which is great because everyone says that Forest Mage book 2 of Soldier Sun is actually where the series is great. Some people say that's the only good book in the trilogy, but I want to read it. So mission accomplished. The problem is that Navarre is only interesting for his contradictions and maybe some of his more negative traits, because this entire book feels like a setup to say, hey, Navarre has this worldview, but in actuality, the world is much different. That is kind of part of the coming of age story, in my opinion. I think we all feel the world is one way, and then as we go and we travel, we get humbled and we realize that the world isn't just the way that we perceived it or were taught it or whatever else. So Navarre's worldview is constantly being challenged, and you can see him struggling with it, evolving in some ways and then projecting some others, and that's kind of what's going on here. I'm not going to beat up on Navarre too much other than the fact that I just don't think it's a home run for a slice of life type of story, but there's also a little bit more going on than just the slice of life. I like it. Robin Hobb's writing is competent. I think it's good writing. I like her writing quite a bit. I like her style of writing. So none of that was a problem. So it's just a good, I would say a solid fantasy book. And I feel like the hate has to come from maybe the comparison to Realm of the Eldlings for people who just wanted more fits. But I'm sure there's other valid complaints. I'm just saying that that's what I see a lot of. So solid book, not amazing, but above average, at least a little by a little margin. And I will continue at some point for sure. A novella that I got to read and was super excited for was Remote Control. And I'm going to mess up the name, but it's Nnedi Okorafor. And this is an author that has written some other stuff, most of it being African-based. This story actually takes place in Ghana. And it is only 100-something pages, and it is a futuristic Africa, post-apocalyptic. I'm not totally positive about that vibe. I've seen people describe it as that, but I don't know if I fully felt that way, as much as it felt a little bit dystopian, because there's this big corporation that's mentioned that is kind of involved in everyone's like medical well-being, which is weird. But it is such a different setting and a part of the same universe, I guess we'll call it a universe or a world, where her book, Who Fears Death, takes place, which was written back in like 2010, I believe. The interesting thing about Okorafor is that Who Fears Death, it was actually optioned and picked up as HBO as a television show. And one of the executive producers, there's many, is George R. R. Martin. And they happen to be very good friends. He highly recommends that book, and he's a big fan of her work. But Remote Control, from what I can tell, doesn't really connect much with that book or any of the sequels that are coming out, but it's like a snapshot in the world kind of prior to that. And the thing about this that you will not like, most likely, if you're a type of reader that likes closure, is not everything in this novella feels complete by the end. There's a lot of stuff that goes unexplained. And if you look at the 1-star reviews for this, because this is one of those polarizing books on Goodreads, usually the critique is, what was this even all about? What was the point if we didn't get all the resolutions? That is almost never how I feel coming out of a story. I'm very much along for the ride and getting a taste of something and vibing with the book, if you will. And for that, I thought this was really good. Just some of the way that the world was set up is fascinating, but the main character is like the daughter of death, kind of, it seems, maybe. And you're being told how her power is so devastating and people are running from her. However, it's a 13 or 14-year-old, I believe, girl who seems normal in a lot of aspects, other than a couple lines where you're like, whoa, okay, that was ominous. But it's kind of this weird juxtaposition of everyone running away, and then you look at what they're running away from, and it's like, a girl. What is this? And that was the hook for me. I loved the way the world was set up, and a lot of the world state of how things are, in this, and I will call it a parallel world to ours, is not info dumped as much as kind of hinted at. And in the way people talk, they mention certain things about like religion in the world, or this big corporation that's messing with all of the Medicare, and there's drones and technology advancements. There's a lot of just little snippets in this and a little taste. And what it did for me was, one, just make me appreciate the story in the world that she's built. But it also made me want to read Who Fears Death quite a bit. So I'm going to be reading that without a doubt. This is an author I have my eye on now. And hey, the TV show could be cool. It's been in production since 2020. I don't know where it's at, but it has not been canceled or shelved as far as we know. So sometimes these things take a while. But if you wanted just a little bit of like futuristic Ghana and Africa and weird weird abilities for this main character, I almost feel like it's treading that line of like, well, is this magic or is this sci-fi? And I don't think we could really necessarily get all the answers here, which is what some people struggle with, but I don't know. It made me think. I really enjoyed it, and the writing was good. It wasn't anything super remarkable stylistically, but she knew how to kind of pack a punch in a sentence every now and then. So this is an author I had my eye on, and I did enjoy Remote Control quite a bit. I'm going to kick it over to another really short novella that I'm not going to talk too much about because I don't want to spoil it, but that is Stephen L. Peck's A Short Stay in Hell. I believe he is an evolutionary biologist in the Mormon Church and has written a lot of scholarly stuff and has won many awards. And this is essentially him taking a look at the afterlife. And if hell was an endless library, basically based on the Library of Babel, and you are forever banished to this library hell until you find the perfect book for you. And I was hoping, this is a very well-written story, and there's so much packed into a short amount of pages, like very short. What I wanted out of this was to feel existential. I kind of wanted to consider the afterlife or death. Mortality is something that I'm always looking to further inspect because I'm kind of just plagued by it in my thoughts. I didn't get much out of this story as far as like, whoa. And I think that's for me personally because I've thought about this stuff a lot. And I don't know. This is just me. But like this idea of an eternal, like it's cool to think about, and the way it's set up, very visual, very, very visual. I'm not a very visual reader, but the Library of Babel scenario, I guess I'll call it, I don't know. It didn't really do much for me. I don't know. I couldn't buy in. How about that? It didn't move me because I couldn't buy in. And even though I think this is a tremendous story that many of you should read, everyone I know who has read this has given it 5 stars. I did not. But it's not because I think it's bad. It just didn't resonate with me as much. I think you should give it a shot. It's very, very short. And definitely does make you think. Like, it is thought-provoking. But it just didn't move me as much as I had wished because, well, I don't know. The library concept sounded cool, but in application didn't move me. So I know that's kind of like a wishy-washy review, but I don't want to ruin it because it's also like very short. I will say the characters and the way they relate to each other in the story, for how short it was, very, very impressive. So go give it a shot and tell me what you think down in the comments. And the last book that I actually finished, I'm currently reading some stuff that I started this month, but the last book is Breakfast of Champions by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. This is obviously someone who's heavily revered in the literary world. Some people put him in that sci-fi category. Some people don't. It doesn't really matter to me. This book has an amazing premise, and the plot is rather like simple, and it definitely takes a back seat to him just kind of filtering through his ideas. But overall, it's a book about a science fiction writer who maybe has, underperformed in his career, was getting published in like nudie magazines and whatnot. And then there's a reader who actually thinks that what he's writing is true. Like, not letting it be fiction, but saying, oh, this guy is like, he's got it. He's got the real truth of the universe. And that is, I think the guy's psycho, but it makes him more psycho. And it's a huge commentary, maybe satire about America and how we treat each other, especially based around race and gender. But more so, it's looking at free will, I think, and determinism, and what that means in modern America, at least modern America at the time he was writing it. And the characters are eccentric. It's all kind of ridiculous. This is what many people have said to be satire. Some people argue about if it's absurdist or not. But this book is funny. I mean, there is an entire chapter where he just goes in about the character's penis size. And the guy is insane, so he would think about these things. And it's very strange. The narrator is kind of nebulous until you start to put things together that it might just be Kurt himself. But yeah, a lot of really good humor in here. But it's bizarre. There's also drawings all throughout the book. At one point, he even draws a rectum. And it's not graphic, so don't worry. Like, no one would know what you're looking at. But it's like a really bad drawing, but also not completely inaccurate. I don't know. Weird book. with satire, it's never been my favorite, and usually what happens is I'm usually all for it. I'm laughing, I'm having a good time, and then usually I get burned out on it fairly quickly, and that didn't happen to about the last maybe 50 to 100 pages of this book that is very short. So unfortunately, it did fall into that category where by the end I was kind of done with it, kind of exhausted by it. I wanted to move on. But I do think that some of the more intense things that are looked at here, even if it is through a lens of satire, are really impactful and powerful. And the whole idea behind this book, from what I understand, is that Vonnegut was coming out of a depressive episode and he really just needed to work through some of his ideas. Some of these ideas or feelings or thoughts are really dark and I would say aren't the easiest to read about, especially when it comes to the race stuff. And Vonnegut, from what I can tell, never meant to offend, but there's definitely stuff in here that didn't necessarily feel like it aged the best. But this is a guy working through this thing in the 60s, and it was strange. It was very strange. The most striking thing is that apparently Kurt Vonnegut's mother, in real life, committed suicide when he was younger, and it really messed with him, and he thought about it a lot. And in the story, it's compared to one of the in-person characters' suicides. And I just thought that was really intense to work through, but I thought he did it in a way that was like, it fit this book, and it made an impact on me. It actually did. So this is a book, yes, I was laughing at a lot, but there's so much going on here. And the one thing it solidified to me is that Vonnegut is someone I want to read more of. Big shout out to John Talking Story. He's the one that recommended Vonnegut to me. And I am reading through Welcome to the Monkey House, a short story collection that I'm really loving. So even though Breakfast of Champions is not an all-timer for me, it's not going to be in the book of the year, it's an obvious display of a very talented writer that at times feels almost tortured by these thoughts, I would say. So you might get a laugh or you might get something out of it. It might make you even cry. I don't know. But what a wild book and what an eccentric, powerful author Vonnegut is. So I'm glad I've tried this out. I can mark it off my list, but it's not the last of Vonnegut that I will be reading. And now it's time for the Patreon pick of the month. I want to give a big shout out to all my patrons, my Wildlings, Night's Watching Kingsguard. These are my top 2 tiers, Night's Watching Kingsguard. They're going to select a random book. Last month was Shaman's Crossing, which I really did enjoy. Being back with Robin Hobb was great. So let's see what we have for the month of June. Now, there's definitely some traps on the list nowadays. I got people picking Colleen Hoover books and some other stuff. Fourth Wing. I can see that people are trying to test my limits, I guess. And the winner is number 15, which is Amanda, and the book is Lapvona by Odessa Moshfegh. I can't remember her name exactly, but I've already actually read a book from her, which is My Year of Rest and Relaxation. Words are hard. And I will now be reading Lapvona. Usually these are kind of absurd and disgusting. That hot girl fiction, as they say. So this is one that I do own, actually, because I wanted to read more after My Year of Rest and Relaxation, but I just didn't know when I would get to it. But it looks like now Amanda will be having me read it in the month of June. I'm excited. Lapvona fits in perfectly because right now I am reading through You Like It Darker, which is Stephen King's short story collection, and also The Witchwood Crown by Tad Williams, the first book in The Last King of Ostenard, the sequel to Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, which I'm loving. And that's actually going to be the reading vlog with those 2 books. But Lapvona fits in. It's something completely different. It's not terribly long, so that's beautiful. I'm also finally going to be continuing The Expanse with book 3, I'm hoping. And then also I will be reading Starfish by Peter Watts. I really liked Blindsight, and I want to read more from him. And then we'll see what else happens. Those are the books I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to get to. Shouldn't be that big of a problem. And I'm still reading 1Q84 by Murakami, and I actually am enjoying it. I'm just reading it very slowly. So let me know what you read in the month of May. I would love to hear about it down below in the comments and what you're going to be reading in June. And as always, thank you so much for checking out this video. If you like it, you can hit like. If you dislike it, you can hit dislike. If you loved it, think about subscribing. There's a Patreon in the description. It's optional, but always appreciated. And until we see you next time, for me and Bobby B, be good, be safe, and remember to always keep turning the page. I'd like to give a big shout out to all my patrons, especially my Kingsguard, which include Bridger, Zan, Adam K, Emil, Jonathan J, Prithvi, Eric B, Chadia, Taylor D, Matthias D, Carlos, Yolanda, John C, John, Garrick, Evie, Henrik, Benjamin C, Sebastian M, Frank C, C. Scott, Jacob Wade, Darren, Jobot, Terrence F, Michael B, Lauren M, Nicholas E, Kai C, Kev, Ryan, Shad, Amanda V, Ikaika, RJ, Stuart C, Oscar A, Derry, Tanner, Stromboli Bones, Damon H, Kuiper, Adam, Caitlin S, Curran G, Slay, Mark J, Mike J, Darnell H, Sabo Archipelago, which I think someone put that name because I know I can't say that word, and Social Teas. Thank you all so very much. You are the best.